There are moments in history when the smallest soul leaves the greatest mark, when a quiet life hidden behind monastery walls changes the course of millions. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux was one such soul, a fragile, smiling young woman who called herself a little flower in the garden of Jesus. She never preached to crowds, never traveled beyond her convent, and never performed miracles during her lifetime. And yet her love, her simplicity, and her complete trust in Jesus made her one of the most beloved saints the world has ever known. When you read her story, it doesn't feel distant. It feels like she's sitting right beside you, whispering the truth that holiness isn't for the mighty or the brilliant, but for every heart that chooses love in the smallest of ways. Her little way, as she called it, was not a grand philosophy. It was a quiet revolution, a return to the pure gospel truth that Jesus himself taught, that greatness is found in humility, that joy is born of surrender, and that heaven begins when we love with childlike trust. In a world where we often chase recognition, where our worth seems measured by what we achieve, Thérèse reminds us of something radically different. She teaches us that the road to heaven is paved not with great deeds, but with little acts done with great love. She found holiness in washing dishes, in smiling through pain, in choosing kindness over complaint. She transformed her weakness into worship, her suffering into an offering, her silence into a song of praise. And here is the beauty of it. Thérèse's life wasn't just about her own soul. It was a living reflection of the gospel. Every moment of her journey echoes the words of Jesus. Unless you become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. She believed that to be small before God was not to be insignificant. It was to be perfectly held, perfectly loved, perfectly free. When she died at just 24, she whispered, "I am not dying, I am entering life." From that moment, the world began to see that her promise was real. Roses began to fall. Miracles, conversions, hope rekindled in hearts that had grown cold. Through her littleness, Thérèse showed that divine love can turn even the most ordinary life into something eternal. So, as we walk together through her story, through her laughter and her tears, her struggles and her surrender, open your heart. You may just find that her little way is not only about her journey to Jesus, but also about yours. Number 1. A hidden soul in God's garden. The early life of Thérèse. Thérèse Martin was born in Alençon, France, on January 2, 1873, into a home that seemed ordinary from the outside, but was filled with extraordinary grace. Her parents, Louis and Zélie Martin, now both canonized saints, raised their children in an atmosphere of prayer, simplicity, and unwavering faith. The Martin home was a garden where God's love quietly bloomed in the daily rhythm of family life, laughter, and devotion. But every garden faces storms. When Thérèse was only 4 years old, her mother died of breast cancer. That moment carved a deep wound in her tender heart. She once described herself as a sensitive child, easily moved to tears, and after her mother's passing, she clung to her father with fierce affection. Louis became her earthly image of Jesus, gentle, loving, and strong. Yet inside, Thérèse carried an ache that words could not soothe. She often said that losing her mother made her turn early toward heaven. She learned that love could be stronger than death, that faith could hold even when the heart breaks. In those early years, the gospel became her anchor, though she didn't yet realize it. Jesus was teaching her through loss that holiness doesn't come from a life free of pain, it grows in the soil of surrender. As a child, she dreamed of being a saint, though she admitted she felt too small and weak for such a calling. But even then, she was beginning to understand that God delights in the little ones. Unless you become like little children, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18. Thérèse lived those words naturally. She trusted easily, loved deeply, and sought to please Jesus in the simplest ways by obeying her family, praying with sincerity, and offering tiny sacrifices that no one else would notice. At 14, something miraculous happened. On Christmas Eve, after years of battling her scrupulous fears and tears, she experienced what she called her complete conversion. In an instant of grace, she felt the heavy weight of childish sensitivity lift from her soul. Jesus had touched her heart, giving her the strength to think less of herself and more of others. She said that from that night onward, she was no longer the same. Her heart was filled with courage, her will set firmly on love. It was then that the seed of her vocation began to bloom. She longed to give herself entirely to Jesus, to live not for her comfort or recognition, but to love him with a pure, joyful heart. Her hidden soul had found its sunlight, and she began to grow into the little flower that would one day fill the church with fragrance. Number 2. Entering Carmel, the hidden fire of love. At 15, when most young girls dream of the world, Thérèse dreamed of heaven. Her heart burned with a quiet fire that could not be contained. She longed to enter the Carmelite convent in Lisieux, where 2 of her sisters had already joined, to give herself fully to Jesus. But there was a problem. She was too young. The rule required her to wait until she was at least 16. Thérèse, however, was not easily dissuaded. Her love was bold, because it was rooted in simplicity. She believed that if Jesus planted this desire in her soul, then he would make a way. And so, with a faith that astonished even her family, she appealed to the local bishop, and when that failed, she went directly to the highest earthly authority she could reach, the Pope himself. In Rome, during a pilgrimage, with her father, she knelt before Pope Leo X. Looking up with tears in her eyes, she begged, "Most Holy Father, in honor of your Jubilee, permit me to enter Carmel at 15. The guards tried to move her away, but the Pope, moved by her courage, placed his hand upon her head and said, "Go, go, you will enter, if God wills it." Those words, quiet yet prophetic, echoed the faith she already lived by. Soon after, permission was granted. At 15 years old, Thérèse crossed the threshold of the Carmel of Lisieux, a cloistered world of silence, prayer, and sacrifice. Behind those walls, hidden from the noise of the world, she began to live out the gospel fully. Her name in religion became Sister Thérèse of the Child Jesus and of the Holy Face, a name that expressed the 2 great mysteries of her love, the simplicity of the infant Jesus and the suffering of his passion. Life in Carmel was not easy. The days were filled with labor, cold nights, misunderstandings, small humiliations. But Thérèse's heart was aflame with joy. She embraced every moment as an opportunity to love. Her work was simple: cleaning, washing, sewing. But she offered each act as a prayer. "To pick up a pin for love can convert a soul," she once said, revealing the essence of her little way. In the silence of the convent, she discovered that love is not proved by feelings but by faithfulness. She sought no recognition, no comfort, only Jesus. Her love grew pure in hiddenness, like a flame protected from the wind. The world outside forgot her, but heaven did not. Her life mirrored the parable of the hidden treasure. In Matthew 13:44, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field." Thérèse had found her treasure in Jesus, and she gave everything to possess it. Her hidden fire burned brighter each day, unseen by the world but lighting the path for generations to come. Inside those quiet walls, she was becoming what Jesus desired most: a soul utterly consumed by love, and though she was hidden from the eyes of men, the fragrance of her holiness was already beginning to rise toward heaven. Number 3, the little way, a gospel of love in every small act. It was within the silent rhythm of Carmelite life that Thérèse discovered the heart of her mission, the little way. This was not a doctrine written in books or preached from pulpits. It was born from the quiet dialogue between her soul and Jesus. She saw that holiness was not reserved for the strong or the gifted, but for anyone who loved deeply in small, hidden ways. The world often praises grand gestures and remarkable deeds, but Thérèse realized that God looks instead at the intention behind each act. She once wrote, "You know well, my Jesus, that I have no other means of proving my love for you than by strewing flowers before you, that is to say, by letting no little sacrifice escape me." Every word she spoke, every smile she gave, every moment of patience she offered became a flower laid at the feet of Jesus. In her little way there was no pride, no striving for recognition, only the pure desire to love God in the ordinary. She believed that the smallest act, if done with love, had infinite value in His eyes. Picking up a needle, sweeping a floor, or bearing a sister's criticism with kindness, all became offerings of love. Her secret was simplicity. Thérèse did not seek to rise high. She sought to descend low, to be small, so that Jesus could be everything. She likened herself to a little child reaching up toward her Father, too small to climb the steps of perfection. She asked Jesus to lift her in His arms. To be little, she wrote, is not attributing to oneself the virtues that one practices, believing oneself capable of anything, but recognizing that God places this treasure in the hands of His little child to be used as He wills. The Bible echoed in every thought of her heart. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones will certainly not lose their reward. Matthew 10:42. Thérèse lived those verses with every breath. Her life became a living commentary on the gospel, an unspoken sermon of love. The little way was not about comfort. It was about surrender. She loved when she didn't feel like loving, forgave when it hurt, and smiled when her soul was weary. Her path was one of hidden heroism, the kind that heaven sees, but the world forgets. In her we see the truth that sanctity is not about success, but about surrender, not about climbing the ladder of greatness, but about stooping low with love. The greatness of her soul lay in her littleness, her complete trust that Jesus could make something beautiful out of her, nothingness. And so while others sought extraordinary ways to please God, Thérèse found the extraordinary in the ordinary. Her little way was a gospel lived in miniature, a radiant light for all who long to love but feel small, weak, or unseen. Number 4. Trials, darkness, and the hidden cross. Holiness never blooms without the shadow of the cross. For Thérèse, the flowers of love were watered by tears. The serenity that shone from her writings was not born of ease. It was forged in trial, darkness, and pain. Soon after she entered Carmel, she began to experience misunderstandings from some of her sisters. Her cheerful nature was sometimes seen as naive, her youth as immaturity. But Thérèse bore every wound silently, offering them to Jesus as her hidden sacrifices. She did not defend herself, she only loved more deeply. Then came illness. Tuberculosis slowly consumed her fragile body, bringing weakness, fevers, and unbearable pain. Yet what tormented her most was not the sickness of the body, but the trial of the spirit. During her final months, God permitted her to walk through a dark night of faith, a silence so deep that she felt as though heaven were closed to her. She wrote in her journal, "Jesus allowed my soul to be invaded by the thickest darkness. I no longer believe in eternal life. Everything has disappeared." These were not words of despair, but of profound trust. She chose to believe even when belief felt impossible. She clung to Jesus as He once clung to the cross, crying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This was her Calvary. Yet even in that darkness, her love only grew. "I choose all she once said, joy, sorrow, and suffering alike, because she wanted nothing more than to love Jesus for His own sake. She learned to find peace in powerlessness, to offer her pain for souls who had lost faith. Her darkness was not a punishment. It was a participation in the passion of Christ. In her suffering, she lived out St. Paul's words, "I fill up in my flesh what is still lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions, for the sake of His body, the church." Colossians. Every cough, every sleepless night, every tear became her prayer. She told her sisters, "I suffer for those who do not know the tenderness of God." Even when she could no longer pray with words, she whispered, "All is grace." That phrase, so simple, yet so profound, revealed the secret of her sanctity. Thérèse discovered that faith is not proven in moments of joy, but in moments of silence. Her darkness became a hidden light for all who doubt, for all who cannot feel God's presence. Her trust became the bridge between despair and hope. And when her body grew too weak to move, her soul remained strong. She offered her final sufferings as an act of love, believing that every drop of her pain could be transformed into grace for others. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Philippians 4:13. Those words became her heartbeat until her final breath. In the midst of her agony, she found the secret joy that only the saints know, the joy of sharing in the cross of Jesus, not as a curse but as a gift. In her hidden suffering, Thérèse became a reflection of the crucified love she adored, a silent witness that faith, when tested by fire, shines brighter than gold. Number 5. The Gospel of Simplicity. Living heaven on earth. As Thérèse's illness deepened and her body weakened, a new light began to dawn in her soul. It was the light of heaven, but not the heaven she once imagined, a distant paradise filled with grandeur and glory. No, for her heaven began here in the smallest acts of love, in the quiet surrender of each moment. "I do not desire to suffer less," she wrote, "but to suffer better for love." To Thérèse, heaven was not merely a place to reach after death. It was a state of being in perfect union with Jesus. She found that every moment of life could become a piece of eternity if it was filled with love. Washing dishes, folding clothes, or offering a smile to a difficult sister, all of it became sacred. She said everything is grace because she had learned to see Jesus in everything. Her gaze was always turned upward, but her feet remained firmly planted on the humble soil of daily duty. This was her gospel of simplicity, finding holiness not in extraordinary visions, but in ordinary fidelity. She reflected deeply on the words of Jesus, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit." John 15:5. She understood that holiness was not her achievement, but the fruit of her surrender to the divine vine. The more she emptied herself, the more Jesus filled her heart. When others sought heroic penances or dramatic sacrifices, Thérèse sought to love quietly, to choose the hidden, humble path. She once said, "It is not enough to love, we must prove our love." But for her, that proof was found in smiling when she wanted to cry, in thanking God when she felt forgotten, in trusting Him when He seemed silent. Even as her illness confined her to bed, she radiated peace. Her sisters later recalled that her sick room felt like a sanctuary. Though she could barely breathe, she whispered words of encouragement, joy, and trust. "I am not dying," she told them with a smile. "I am entering life." In her final days, she wrote words that would outlive her. "I will spend my heaven doing good on earth." That promise was not poetry, it was prophecy. She believed that love never dies. It only changes its form. From heaven, she would continue her mission to let fall a shower of roses, blessings and graces upon souls who long to find Jesus in the smallness of life. Through her simplicity, Thérèse teaches us something the world forgets. Holiness is not about being extraordinary. It's about being entirely God's. She reminds us that heaven is not a reward for the mighty, but a home for the meek. Not a distant dream, but a reality that begins wherever love is found. Number 6. The little flowers bloom. Miracles, devotion, and global impact. When Thérèse of Lisieux took her final breath on September 30, 1887, she was only 24 years old. Her frail body had been consumed by tuberculosis, yet her face shone with peace. Her last words, "My God, I love you," were whispered like the soft fragrance of a flower carried by the wind. The world outside the Carmel convent barely noticed her passing. But heaven did. What happened after her death was nothing short of miraculous. The little flower that had bloomed in obscurity began to fill the whole world with its fragrance. Her sisters compiled her writings into a simple memoir, story of a soul, never expecting the impact it would have. Yet once published, it spread like holy fire across nations, languages, and hearts. Readers who had never heard of a Carmelite life found themselves transformed by her little way. Miracles began to unfold, healings, conversions, and countless answered prayers. People reported receiving roses as signs of her intercession, sometimes mysteriously appearing after prayers made in her name. The shower of roses she had promised had begun to fall. In 1925, just 28 years after her death, Pope Pius XI canonized her as Saint Thérèse of the Child Jesus and of the Holy Face. She was declared the youngest doctor of the Church, a title reserved for those whose teachings profoundly shape Christian spirituality. Her doctrine was not complex theology, but a revelation of divine simplicity, love, and trust. Her influence spread far beyond the Church. Missionaries carried her writings to distant lands. Soldiers in the trenches, as war, kept her picture close to their hearts. Families, nuns, and priests alike looked to her as a companion in prayer. Her name became synonymous with hope. The hope that even in weakness one can love deeply, that even in littleness one can become great in the eyes of God. The Bible says the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon, planted in the house of the Lord. They will flourish in the courts of our God. Psalm 92:12-13. That verse found new life in Thérèse. Though her roots were hidden in the soil of humility, her branches reached the ends of the earth. Today, Thérèse is one of the most beloved saints in history. Churches, schools, and even cities bear her name. Pilgrims flock to Lisieux to pray at her shrine, drawn by the same fragrance of love that filled her short life. But her legacy is not in monuments. It lives in hearts. Every time a person chooses forgiveness instead of anger, patience instead of complaint, or love instead of pride, her little way blooms again. Her message is as fresh now as it was in 1897. Holiness is not about doing more. It's about loving more. Every small act of kindness, every hidden sacrifice, every whispered prayer is a petal in the bouquet we offer to Jesus. In her hiddenness, Thérèse became a light for the nations. In her littleness, she changed the world. The little flower of Lisieux still blooms, not just in history books or churches, but in every soul that dares to believe that love, even in its smallest form, can move heaven itself. Number 7. The little way for us today. Becoming love in the ordinary. The beauty of Thérèse's message is that it was never meant to stay behind convent walls. Her little way was a path for every heart, for mothers raising children, workers struggling through long days, students facing uncertainty, priests and missionaries serving in silence, and even those who feel too broken or too ordinary to ever become holy. Her life was a message from heaven that every soul, no matter how small, can become a living flame of love. Thérèse once said, "Love alone counts." Those words carry the weight of eternity. In a world obsessed with achievement, where worth is measured by success, she reminds us that Jesus sees only the heart. Every simple act done with faith, done with love, becomes a prayer. The smallest smile, a kind word, a hidden sacrifice, all can echo through eternity when offered for Him. Her way is not about doing extraordinary things. It is about doing ordinary things extraordinarily well, with a pure heart. She turned daily frustrations into opportunities for grace. When others annoyed her, she prayed for them. When her work was dull, she offered it for souls. When she felt lonely, She united her heart with Jesus in Gethsemane. Every heartbeat became a hymn of love. We can live her little way right where we are. The mother who wakes at night to comfort her child can whisper, "Jesus, I do this for you." The worker who faces stress and exhaustion can offer each effort as a prayer. The person who forgives when it's hard, who chooses patience instead of anger, who stays kind in a cruel world, that person walks the little way. It is not an escape from suffering, but a way through it. Thérèse teaches us that trust is the truest form of courage. When life feels uncertain, when prayers seem unanswered, when darkness surrounds us, she invites us to whisper as she did, "Jesus, I trust in your love." Her spirituality is deeply rooted in Scripture. Jesus said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Matthew 11:30. The little way is that light burden. The daily acceptance of life's imperfections carried with love. It is the invitation to live with open hands, to find joy in simplicity, to be content with being small in a world that worships size. Even now, her words reach across time. The world's mine no longer. I'm entering into love. Her call is not just to admire her holiness, but to imitate it, to believe that even in our flaws, God's grace can bloom. Holiness, as Thérèse proved, is not perfection. It is the art of love. If we allow her to teach us, we'll discover that sanctity is not beyond our reach. It's waiting for us in our homes, in our workplaces, in the smallest corners of our daily lives. All it takes is a willing heart, a heart that dares to love as she did, quietly, humbly, and completely. Conclusion. The rose that never fades. As her final hours approached, the frail young nun of Lisieux whispered her last words, "My God, I love you." With that, the flower of her life closed gently and then began to bloom in eternity. The promise she made came true. She began to let fall a shower of roses. Through the years, those roses have fallen upon countless hearts, souls healed, faith rekindled, lives transformed by her intercession and example. Thérèse's story is not one of grandeur or worldly triumph. It is the story of a heart that learned the secret of the gospel, that love is the greatest force in the universe. Her path was hidden, but her light reached the nations. She showed that sanctity does not require fame or brilliance, but a heart completely surrendered to Jesus. And perhaps that is why her message endures. In our restless, noisy world, the little way whispers a divine simplicity. You don't have to be strong to be holy. You just have to love. You don't have to accomplish great things to please God. You only need to trust Him in small ones. Every rose she sends reminds us that grace can bloom even in barren soil. Every prayer she answers is proof that heaven listens to the little ones. Her life teaches us that when we do everything for love, even the smallest act becomes eternal. The Bible says, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Matthew 5:5. Thérèse lived and proved those words. In her meekness, she conquered hearts. In her littleness, she became a giant of faith. She was the little flower who changed the world, not through power or miracles, but through love that knew no measure. So now the invitation is ours. Let us walk her little way patiently, joyfully, hearts full of trust. Let us become like her, small and simple, yet burning with the great fire of divine love. And when life feels heavy, when the path seems hidden, remember her promise. "After my death I will let fall a shower of roses." Look up, because the roses still fall. The fragrance of her love still fills the earth. And if you open your heart to that love, you too will bloom, a little flower in God's garden, radiant with the light that never fades.